I'm once again joined by the boxing brain, my brother, sporting a rather fetching green hoodie today. We're talking heavyweights right now. A lot going on in the UK heavyweight scene at present, likes of Fury, Price, Chisora, Hay, Joshua. A lot more going on in the international scene. We'll come to the international scene in a moment. Let's talk domestic first. Fury, Chisora, go.
Well, what is it to say? It's happened twice. Both of them have been shutout victories for Fury. Taller man, bigger reach, seemingly better prepared in both fights.
Tyson Fury did a better job on Derek Chisora than Vitaly Klitschko. Discuss.
I don't know. I mean, they basically employed the same thing: jab, jab, cross, jab, jab, cross, jab, 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 cross. Obviously, Vitaly, I think, was carrying an injury in that fight, or at least became injured during that fight, so he couldn't stop Chisora. They were both shutout victories. At the end of the day, I know obviously Chisora's corner threw in the towel, but that's because he'd effectively given up at that point.
Yes. Anthony Joshua.
Mm-hmm.
How hot a prospect do you rate him at this stage of his career?
It's very difficult to say, considering he hasn't really stepped it up much. I mean, the leap to me from, was it Michael Sprott?
Yeah.
To Kevin Johnson seems huge.
Yeah.
Johnson may seem somewhat faded, but he's still a credible fighter, somewhat. More so than Matt Sprott. So it'll be
Michael Sprott. I think the thing with Skelton, with Johnson, I agree, Johnson's level's above Sprott, but Johnson doesn't come to win.
No, I don't know about that. I think he does come to win. I just think he comes in with much more realism now. I think he realises he's not a title fighter anymore.
But let's be honest, in the Johnson Fury and Johnson Chisora fights, he just didn't throw enough punches to win.
No, but that's not his. He's not a volume fighter. He dances, he jabs, he makes the other guy look bad.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do when you're facing someone who's bigger than you in Chisora and much taller than you in Fury.
I don't think AJ will knock Johnson out. I don't think anyone can knock Johnson out. I think he's so durable and so defensively smart. Even coming down to things like his ring positioning and the angles he turns at. I think he's a very, very hard man to look good against.
True. I mean, this will be much more of a test, I think, because it's going to test things we haven't seen from Anthony Joshua, movement, both head, body and lateral. He's going to have to try and catch him, he's going to have to try and chase him. He likes to pin men on the ropes. Well, Kevin Johnson allowed him to do that. He's a 30-fight veteran plus.
And also, I think, we've seen Anthony Joshua can punch a little bit. But for me, he isn't a puncher in the same league as David Price at this stage. I mean, let's be honest, he's not knocking people's spark out. Michael Sprott stopped on his feet. I mean, we saw what Erkan Tepe did to Michael Sprott last year. Devastating knockout. But Michael Sprott stopped on his feet. We've seen AJ drop other heavyweights multiple times, and not knock them out. Don't get me wrong, the guy can clearly hit. But for me, he's not leaving people on the floor like Wilder is and like Price is. And I think, if he knocks Kevin Johnson out, we have to say, look, this guy's got real power. So for me, it's a very interesting test. I think the other fascinating dynamic to the fight is I believe it's going to be a 10-round or 12-round fight. Now, Anthony Joshua's got a kind of musculature and a kind of physique which suggests that going 12 rounds may come quite difficult. Especially when you consider he's never gone beyond, 3-4 rounds before. Now, I'm not saying Johnson beats him, but I think if Johnson takes him to round 8, round 9, with Joshua's weight, with his muscles, I want to see how he's doing in round 10. I want to see how he's doing in round 11. I want to see how he's doing against an opponent who's using angles and using technique. I think it's a real interesting test.
I think it depends on what Kevin Johnson brings. I mean, if what you say is true, he doesn't come to win, then he's not got a hope. If he takes him and drags him into deep water, because you're right, AJ's a monster.
Yeah.
If he takes him to round 8 plus, and then pours it on, if AJ's too tired to bring his arms up, but that's something we'll only know on the day of the fight.
Yeah.
We don't know how AJ prepares in camp, what he does in camp, what his fitness and routine, what his strength and conditioning routine is.
What about Fury Klitschko?
I think Fury's been down one too many times against subpar opposition for me to think he's an overtly credible opponent. Vladimir hits fucking hard. Oops, sorry, not swear.
But Vladimir hits hard, but I don't really think, for me, the way I see Fury fighting him is almost fighting him like he's a small man, fighting him like he's Derek Chisora, keeping him at the end of a jab, using range, using distance.
It will be very interesting to see, because someone of that same sort of build, who comes with a similar sort of tactic,
Fury's a lot bigger than Vlad.
Fleury's a lot bigger than Vlad, but so was Marius Vach, and Vach was dispatched in.
What went the distance?
Did he?
Yeah, and
Beat down, but yes, he would.
Fury's a lot more offensively capable than Wok, in my opinion.
Maybe. I don't think he's as strong though.
But I think it's an interesting fight. I think we've seen guys like Povetkin and Pulev who are very, very good fighters, but in my opinion, despite the fact that they were good fighters, they never had a hope in hell of beating Klitschko. I mean, let's be honest. Povetkin came trying to throw hooks, and Klitschko just closed him down. Pulev came trying to jab him against the best jabber on the planet, in my opinion. But at least Fury's going to bring something different. It's a new test with his size. So I think that's an interesting fight. Let's talk briefly the return of David Haye, which is threatened for 2015 for some time.
I just read about that last night.
Do you see any big fights on the horizon for Mr. David Haye?
Well, he's got the speed and the knockout power, so potentially yes. It depends on how they get him. Because I would imagine they'll try and get him against Ruslan Chagayev.
Chagayev is the obvious fight, isn't it?
But what that will do for him, because everyone knows he's the chap who lost his title to Vladimir Klitschko, and Vladimir Klitschko still has the title. So there will be an issue there. Otherwise, it's probably quite easy to put him in against some of the mid to lower ranked top 10. He'd beat a fair few people. I think he'd take Manuel Char. I think he'd do well against Kubrat Pulev. If they put him in the deep horse straight away, they'll throw him in with Povetkin. But I don't know how likely.
Povetkin is going to be fighting Mike Perez because Jennings is fighting Klitschko. They're doing a sort of eliminator to see who will fight the winner of Wilder Stiverne, and Povetkin is going to fight Mike Perez. It's a fight that I've actually been quite bold on and tipped Mike Perez to win. Do you have any thoughts on that?
From what I've seen of Alexander Povetkin, I'm not overtly impressed. I think the first fight of his I watched was his fight versus, I think, Danny Williams, if memory serves me correct, which should never have been sanctioned, let alone allowed for a world title fight.
Povetkin, Danny Williams?
Yeah, I think so. 2 rounds. No, you're quite right. Hassan Rahman.
Hassan Rahman, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
don't know what happened there. I mean, which is a disgraceful fight. And then when he went up against the elite, yes, it was jab and grab and thrown to the ground for 12 rounds. But he was handled. I would be interested to see him fight.
For me, Carlos Takam, I think Takam took a few early rounds with him by jabbing and using distance, and I think Mike Perez, with his amateur pedigree, can expose similar flaws. I think Perez is so tough, so durable, such a good chin. It's going to be hard for Povetkin to KO him like he did Takam.
True.
We're discussing a fight here to face the winner of Stiverne Wilder, which is due January 17th. Your thoughts on that class?
Well, I think it's a very interesting class. I think it's a colossal step up for Deontay. Monster puncher though he is. I don't know, I reckon I could see both of them on the floor just because Deontay has that power, but his chin's a wee bit suspect considering amateurs and considering some of the impact David Haye was landing in sparring with headgear and big gloves. Although obviously
he was dropped in the pros by a journeyman, Harold Scroniers. He dropped Deontay Wilder, and Wilder got up at 9 and looked dead to the world.
Really? I haven't seen that.
Yeah, the tape got pulled online actually.
Did it?
Yeah, it isn't surprising at all. But yeah, I'll be honest. I'm going to do a more detailed video on my channel for people to have a watch, and I'll talk about all the dynamics. But my view on that one is that Bermane Stiverne's going to knock Deontay Wilder out. I think Deontay Wilder is amazingly flawed for an amateur Olympian. I mean, if you look at the David Haye sparring, it's frightening how bad he is. If you look at the Wilder Audley Harrison footage, I mean, that is...
The way he wings his punches in.
Ridiculous. Someone like Bermane Stiverne is such a clever fighter, such a counter-puncher. Doesn't surprise me at all if Wilder clocks Stiverne, goes in like that, and Stiverne just takes his head off. I mean, Bermane Stiverne is one of the hardest punchers in the sport. Yes, he doesn't have Deontay Wilder's knockout record, but look what he did to Chris Arreola twice. This guy is a huge puncher, and if Wilder is in any way suspect on his chin, which we have suspicion he may be, it's going to be very, very tough for him. Wilder's going to need a better chin than Chris Arreola, or he's going to need to, when you've got Deontay Wilder's power, you could always just knock someone out, and you never know. You'd almost hope that this fight goes a few rounds though, because what I don't want to see is Deontay Wilder knocking Stiverne out in 30 seconds, and then we have this world champion who is still so untested, you know. I'd almost rather Wilder wins on points than wins by knockout, if that makes sense. But we'll see. I am deeply suspect of Deontay Wilder at this point. Stiverne, the Ray Austin fight I've watched a few times. I'm not 100% convinced, but I'm a lot more convinced on him than I am on Deontay Wilder. I would rate Stiverne probably as top 5 heavyweight. Deontay Wilder I wouldn't quite rate those heights, I don't believe, at this stage. I don't really see either man as posing credible opposition to Vladimir Klitschko. What I would say is, with the power dynamic they bring to the table, both of them would have a chance. Just because I think they hit that hard. Any other thoughts from yourself on the heavyweight division?
Excuse me. Not particularly. Because things are set in stone now. Klitschko is fighting Jennings, Fury is fighting Christian Hammer, and Wilder Stiverne is going on, with a few other people floating around as well.
I really hope Povetkin Perez gets made.
Povetkin Perez.
Chagayev is terrible, isn't he? Like, he would lose to anyone in the top 10, surely you'd say.
Maybe so, but it's interesting to just see what happens.
Yeah.
You know, there are still plenty of people floating around in the top 10.
That's our thoughts on the heavyweight division. Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching.